I was 17 years old. I was married. And 10 months after I was married, I had a baby girl. She was very ill, very jaundiced, and the doctor told me, the OBGYN who had delivered her, told me that if I ever had another child, I would die. 3 months later, I was pregnant again. And I was absolutely terrified. So I went back to him and I said, "Am I pregnant?" And he said, "Yes." And he said, "I told you not to get pregnant." And I said, "But you didn't tell me how not to."
I thought we were pretty close. I mean, we had talked about getting married, we had talked about babies, we had talked about what we would name a child. And when I got pregnant and said, "I'm pregnant," everything changed. It was like, well, whose is it? And that was such a shock to me that the relationship ended.
And there was this whole kind of thing that we had to keep it an absolute secret, and it was a humiliating, strange kind of experience. And so I decided I should have an abortion. I didn't know what it would be. I didn't really understand the implications in the fact that it was illegal. So I said, well, it was just like it would make this problem go away.
Until the mid-1800s, abortions were legal and available in the United States. Both the state and the church permitted abortions if they occurred before quickening, when the mother first perceived fetal movement. In 1847, the newly formed American Medical Association began a campaign to professionalize medicine by outlawing what it called quackery. Included in its ban were midwives and herbalists who had provided abortion and maternity care in their communities for centuries. During the second half of the 19th century, Victorian society began to condemn women seeking abortions as selfish, immoral, and shirking the duty of motherhood. Protestant and Catholic churches joined the medical establishment in expressing their condemnation. Meanwhile, legislation restricting abortion continued to spread, and by the turn of the century, both birth control and abortion were illegal in most states. If a woman needed medical treatment after a botched abortion, she faced a humiliating and dangerous situation. Even though infected and bleeding, she was often required to testify against her husband or lover and the abortionist before she could receive medical care.
Believing I am about to die, make this my ante-mortem statement. I became acquainted with John Schockweiler. I had sexual intercourse with him, and in the month of May, I noticed that I was pregnant.
I, Cora Alice Grimes, about to die, make this statement. On the second day of July, 1896, James Dunn, a retail merchant, gave me a packet of calomel. I took 2 doses of the calomel.
I, Renetta Parker, am about to die. I went to visit Dr.
Well into the 20th century, a climate of fear prevailed.
I went to medical school in New York City in the 50s when abortions were illegal, and every day the city hospital that my medical school staffed would have 20 or 30 women come in infected, bleeding, and dying from abortions that they had induced themselves, and the coat hanger trick was used, or they had a friend that had a catheter and they'd leave the catheter in until for a day or two, and she was bleeding and cramping, and they'd come in, and that's not an exaggeration. I think it was true in any major city area in this country in the 50s.
Okay. When we got them, we received them like with a temperature of 105. Bleeding. Totally infected. We had some die in shock because they did not tell the truth, and they was afraid to tell the truth as to what had happened, because they knew it was illegal, and they felt like we were only getting the information to report them to the police.